In order to lead the people, you must love the people. In order to save the people, you must serve the people.
Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before.
For 7 months, we've opened the door leading to conversations often too heavy to lift. We've watched the Bay Area, and the country for that matter, react with pain, fear, and even joy. This month, a daughter of the Bay Area, Kamala Harris, made history once again, the first woman of any race to hold the second highest position in the country. Now, Vice President-elect of the United States of America. But even in that joy, we're seeing women of color finally break those barriers. Not everything is fixed in this situation. We're seeing systemic racism continue and fear of change. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Marcus Washington.
And I'm Jessica Aguirre. It took women nearly 100 years to win the right to vote, and then another 100 years to see their vote send a woman to the White House. An historic election that many say was made possible by the black vote, especially black female voters. And as a result, a record number of women will serve in the new Congress. And for the first time, as Marcus just told us, a woman of color will answer to the title Vice President of the United States. We're living in a time of uncharted change, a time many dreamt of when they marched in the streets fighting for equality. And now, for the first time in history, they're watching a woman of color climb to the nation's second most powerful job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kamala Harris, born in Oakland to immigrant parents, is a one-woman melting pot, working her way from San Francisco DA to State Attorney General to Senator, and now Vice President-elect.
Every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibility.
Harris has raised the roof of possibility, shattering the ultimate glass ceiling and inspiring young girls of color to set their sights as high as they can see.
She kind of inspires me to never give up.
The 2020 election spotlight also shone on Stacey Abrams, a recent Georgia gubernatorial candidate. Abrams is credited with helping register 800,000 black voters in her state, an effort that helped snag that Biden-Harris win in Georgia.
We went to communities that had never seen a politician.
The ascension of Abrams and Harris reverberates at a time when the nation is reflecting on racial equity. And the next Congress seats at least 141 women.
Now we will be seen, we will be heard, and young girls will know that they too can achieve whatever heights they want to achieve.
A record voting turnout among people of color, an outcome that promises to change politics forever. Just the latest steps on that long road of change.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, when becoming the first, you often open doors and dreams for people. Young girls and boys can now see more possibilities. From President Obama to Kamala Harris, Valerie Jarrett has had a front seat to it all. The former senior advisor to President Obama is a Stanford graduate. Now, I spoke with her from her New York home. We discussed a lot, from social injustice, race in the workplace, and of course, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris.
Well, I always say, Marcus, it's very hard to be what you can't see. And now you can. And as she says, quoting her mother, just because you're first doesn't mean you're going to be the only. And so make sure you leave the door open so that others can follow in your footsteps. And now people can not just dream, but they can see that it can happen. This isn't some fantasy, it's reality. And not only that, but the fact that the president-elect selected her because he wanted her voice to be the last voice he heard on important issues where her advice and counsel will be extraordinarily important to his decision-making. That's important as well. The fact that he respects her and he wanted to have a strong woman right there by his side indicates his appreciation about the importance of diversity in our governance.
And speaking of women, a lot of people looking at Stacey Abrams as being such a big force within the state of Georgia, galvanizing the voters, getting more people registered to vote. And that leads to a tweet that Kamala Harris Vice President-elect Kamala Harris wrote, and I want to read it to you, and I want to get your thoughts on that. She says, "I speak directly to the Black women in our country. Thank you. You are too often overlooked and yet are asked time and again to step up and be the backbone of our democracy. We could not have done this without you." Your thoughts?
Such an important message for her to deliver, because she's absolutely right. Black women have been the backbone of our democracy and certainly the Democratic Party forever, and have often gone unrecognized. And I think it was her way of saying, not only am I one of you, I see you, I hear you, and you will be a part of this administration. Your voices will be heard.
As a Black woman, what did that make you feel?
Oh, as a Black woman, to have the Vice President of the United States be a woman that looks like me, it's everything. It's deeply moving. I am proud of her. I have cried more times than I will confess to you when I see her doing interviews on the world stage, and I know she will represent well, and representation matters.
I want to talk to you about just racial injustice reform for a moment. So much has gone on within this last year within the country. When you hear the names George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Jacob Blake, Walter Wallace, talk to me about what comes to mind and where we are as a country right now.
I am hopeful. I think the fact that we saw demonstrations in all 50 states, people of all races, backgrounds, ages, coming together and saying Black Lives Matter is a very important watershed moment for our country. That's never happened before, and I'm old enough to remember the Civil Rights Movement. But the question is, do we turn that moment, that watershed moment, not just to be an inflection point, but a movement that continues and is sustained over time? And I think that it will be. I think that, and I give credit to the young people who are organizing much of what we are seeing across the country, who are pushing at the state and local level and the federal level about issues like no-knock warrants, of reforming reimagining our police and how they provide the services that are so vital to us, but do it in a way that is fair and just. Getting rid of systemic racism and recognizing it's not just a problem within the police department, it's a problem in our society. And the first step is recognizing it. I've had more business leaders over the last several months call me and say, I've been listening to my workforce and what I'm hearing is troubling, and I'm determined to try to make this a more, not just diverse workforce, but inclusive. Because it's one thing to recruit people, but do they stay? Do they move up in the organization? And so I think that we have huge potential right now that will come out of horrendous tragedy. And what we have to get rid of is kind of the toxicity that we see in the airways and on social media, and treat your neighbor as though you are your brother's keeper. You are your sister's keeper. And that's what I think I felt in those demonstrations, where it wasn't just Black people. It was everybody saying we need change. We all have to help with the healing process. This isn't just something that's up to the president and the vice president alone. We all have the ability to say, we can do better than this. We can end the racial strife that has been a plague on our country since slavery. And we can find that goodness in one another if we're only willing to open our hearts.
Mr. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your words.
Excellent interview. All right, legendary labor leader, women's advocate, civil rights icon, and mother. How would she end racism? My one-on-one conversation with Dolores Huerta coming up.
You can add your voice tonight. With each episode, we hear from viewers before, during, and after the show. Jamie from Discovery Bay said, please keep the conversation going because knowledge is power, and power leads to change. Here's how you can chime in by social media. Our teams posted about the show on Twitter and Facebook. We welcome you to respond with your comments and questions. I'll be back a little later to share.
Justice can be slow. Those words from civil rights activist Dolores Huerta. She's dedicated her life to fighting for farm workers' rights, immigrant rights, women's rights. Now, I met with Huerta near her home in Bakersfield to talk about the struggle, La Lucha, in the 60s and the 70s when she co-founded the United Farm Workers Labor Union with Cesar Chavez. Today, at 90 years old, Huerta is still an organizer and still a believer in the fight for equality.
We're at the point now where people are going to say, yes, I'm an anti-racist. You know, I care about the people of color. I care about education. I care about the environment. I care about health care. We know that these issues have existed for generations, but they've never been addressed. And now people are demanding it's time to talk about this. It's time to do something about it.
And now we're hearing that phrase, Black Lives Matter, really being spoken out loud in communities across this country, in white communities and Latino communities all over the place. And you say that there is a very simple solution for ending racism.
I do. I really believe that the one thing that we can do is just remember that we are one human family. I don't think we should use the word race unless it's attached to the word human race. Otherwise, we should say we have a lot of different ethnic groups, we have a lot of different nationalities, we have a lot of different cultures, but we only have one human race.
So how do you put into context the work that you did for, you know, the farm workers, los campesinos, that you did 55 years ago? How do you put that in the context of what's happening right now in this country?
Well, the one thing that we do know is that the farm workers were only able to get a measure of justice because everybody, 17 million Americans, stopped eating grapes. And it took that much organization and unity of people of good heart that made it necessary for the growers to come and give the farm workers the kind of what they were asking for, which were very simple human rights, you know, a toilet in the field, cold drinking water, relief periods, unemployment insurance. But it took everybody together, and I think that's what it's going to take to meet these challenges too, because we know that the racism is so systemic in our society. It's in our educational system, it's in our court system, it's in our health system. Dr. Martin Luther King said that racism is an illness, and it's something that needs to be healed. And I believe in our society, every one of us, we have to become the healers, and we have to do everything that we can to erase the racism, erase the sexism, erase the homophobia. You know, we have to be healed as a nation.
We've seen that it really has been women of color, black women, Latina women that have really taken up this rallying cry and this mantle of asking for social justice. Do you reflect that you're the one that gave them the opportunity to use their voice and their power?
I think when women stand up the way that we have seen, it impacts the entire family, because we know that women are the ones that set the standards for the family. It's about activism or caring for other people. It's always the women that do this.
Are you surprised that we still haven't had a woman president?
I, like many women, we definitely know we need a woman president. We have seen that we have women, when we have women in leadership, as we have seen during the pandemic, that people are so much more protected when we do have women as leaders.
But if you could write your legacy, what would it be?
Well, I would like to be remembered as an organizer. Like, I'm 90 years old, and a lot of people say, shouldn't you just retire right now? But even in the Zoom world right now, if we can reach more people and, you know, kind of recruit them to become activists, get more people involved, get more people engaged, because Helen Keller said that the worst evil that men have, that human race has, is that we are apathetic.
You are not apathetic.
No, we cannot be apathetic anymore. If we want a democracy, if we want to really have a true democracy, that means everybody's got to be involved.
What do you know now that you didn't know when you were negotiating con los patrones, with the big business owners? What do you know now?
I think I'm learning that, number one, not to give up, that's for one thing, because I think a lot of times people get discouraged and they
and justice can be slow.
Yeah, justice can be slow, but we can achieve it.
When you look back and you reflect, is there anything you would have done differently?
I think maybe my children are the ones that made the sacrifice, but in spite of that, they turned out great because they turned out to be very independent, very resourceful. They kind of survived, and then they grew up in the movement, so they have a very, very strong commitment to social justice themselves.
But I'm sure now they reflect and they look at you, and they have to be able to say, my mom is Dolores Huerta. She changed the world. That has to be an enormous gift to give them, even if they lost something in childhood.
Well, at the same time, like my son, my youngest son Ricky says, he says, yeah, we had to share our mother with the world, but she shared the world with us.
You came up with that iconic phrase, "Si se puede." We even saw Obama give you, props for saying, yes, we can, that he stole it from you. When you hear that phrase now, right, whether it's in English like Obama, yes, we can, or you hear little school kids on a playground where they're chanting that, does that move you?
I feel very, very proud every time I hear it, and because I know that it means, in Spanish, it means, yes, I can. But it also means, yes, we can. And I think it's a very empowering slogan because it really means that each of us has the power to change things. And a lot of people don't know that they have that power. They don't think that their lives matter. They don't think that their votes matter. But when they hear "Si se puede," it does mean, yes, we can make it happen. Yes, I can make it happen.
Si se puede.
Si se puede.
Si se puede. It's right. It's not often you get to go meet a civil rights icon and talk to them. I have to say that was such an amazing experience because she is even more powerful, more meaningful when you see her in person and you know the road that she has traveled and how much she's done and that she has this fire burning in her still and the level of optimism. You walk away from that saying, "Si se puede." She's right.
And what I loved about that, Jessica, is when she was saying, I'm still learning. At 90 years old, all that she's done, she's still learning. And I think that's a lesson for all of us is that, no matter how experienced you are in this world, you can still learn more.
Yeah, and I think the thing I loved from her was when she said, if you just look at someone and remember, we're all the human race.
Yeah, a human family race. Yeah, human family.
Phenomenal. Okay, well, Huerta has influenced so many lives, but who influenced her? The teacher and friends that helped her on this journey. You can check it out on our digital original on NBCBayArea.com/Race in America.
Well, still ahead for you, our own Cheryl Hurt. She is joining the conversation tonight. We're actually going to talk to her about experiences covering social unrest and get perspective on being one of few women of color in the newsroom earlier in her career. We're going to talk about it coming up.
Well, tonight, the conversation includes bringing in one of our own colleagues as well.
Yeah, Cheryl Hurt. She's been a reporter in the Bay Area. Many of you know her. She's been here for 30 years. Cheryl's joining us now. And Cheryl, can I just say, it is a pleasure to be working with you tonight. I can tell you, Cheryl, I've gone to a lot of different places around the community, and people always say, do you know Cheryl?
I get that, too.
Of course I know Cheryl. But what I want to talk to you about tonight, the day that it was announced that Joe Biden would be the next president of the United States, which meant that Kamala Harris would become the first black woman of color, to hold a position, vice president of the United States. Talk to me about what that meant for you personally as a black woman.
Well, I have to be honest, and it's really nice talking to both of you, too. I have to be honest, going about my daily life, reporting day in and day out, I try not to immerse myself in what's happening around me. I'm really focused on what I'm doing that day. And I have to be honest with you, when they did make that announcement, I felt something. And I didn't think I would feel something. I knew it was happening. I knew it was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen, but I knew that it was a possibility. But when that possibility became real, I felt something inside. I felt pride because I'm a black woman. But I also felt a little giddiness because I know that women have gone through this struggle, and this particular woman broke the glass ceiling, and she happens to be a black woman. So I did feel something inside.
Well, Cheryl, you and I are both contemporaries, obviously, with Kamala Harris, and a lot has changed in our business the last few decades, which is evident from the fact that when you look at the screen right now, you're seeing 2 black journalists and a Latina, and we're talking race right now, right? But you and I both remember, right, when we were the only one in the newsroom, where we had to represent everyone, right? So I think if we look at what Harris has done, what Vice President-elect Harris has done, it's meaningful to little girls, but it's very meaningful to women of our age as well.
It's very meaningful because I was just standing here listening to the interview, and the interview you did with Dolores Huerta was amazing. That's a whole nother story. But I started thinking about my growing up and what my mother told me. And my mother always told me, and I was raised in the early 60s, you can do anything. You can be the president of the United States. And I'm looking at her like, what are you talking about, Willis? No, what? No, that's not possible. But I remember her saying that, and now living it, it just kind of makes you, I don't know the words for it, but when you talk about being the only one in the newsroom, I do have to tell you this story. I was one of a very few, not the only black woman, but another black woman was there. And when I got hired, she pulled me aside and said, well, you know, they hired you to replace me. And I was very hurt by that because maybe I was naive. I said, no way, that's not true. Are you kidding me? I would never do that. But it's not my decision. So in her opinion, I was hired to replace her. I went on to work several years together with her, and I'm happy about that. But maybe that was true, maybe it wasn't. But to your point, I do remember being one of the very few black women in the newsroom, and with that comes a big responsibility.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And Cheryl, I want to talk about responsibility because sometimes, you know, as a reporter out in the field, you're not only representing your station, but for many people, you are representing your race. And I know for me covering the Baltimore riots and the protest of Freddie Gray, a lot of social injustice happening, buildings burning. But in the midst of all of that, I still had to think about the history of why this is happening at that moment. Talk to me about the responsibility that you feel when you're out covering stories that reflect your community.
It's tough and it's not tough. I'm going out as a reporter and I'm the color green. I'm going out telling a story. You see the racial injustice, you see the anger, you're going to see that. You see people marching, you're going to see that. I'm trying to tell the story, and I know why it is. It's not my responsibility to tell you why they're out there. It's their responsibility. So I feel the responsibility as a reporter, as a black woman, to properly tell that story through people. So it's my job to get the appropriate people, in my opinion, to tell that story. So that's where the rub comes in for me, is who's the appropriate person to tell this story. I just try to get everybody in there and put it in my pot and bring it to the public. I mean, that's what I try to do on a daily basis.
All right, let's take off our reporter hats for a second, Cheryl, and talk about, as we move around the community, we do a lot of community things, and now there is a shift, I think, in the way we go out into the community. I mean, the shift has been happening for a long time, the way we're able to represent ourselves, that we don't have to always be the one black person or the one Hispanic person in this room. What do you think now with Vice President elect Harris in the White House, how that will change for all of us as well?
Well, it shows, in my opinion, that hopefully one day we won't have to be a black reporter. Yeah. I hope now that you be just a reporter. And I think that with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris in the White House, that can become a reality very soon.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. It's so great seeing you. Thanks for being with us. You know, that point that she makes is so true, right? Because I remember being told for jobs that I wanted, well, they already have a Hispanic. They don't need another one. And my response was always like, can't I just be a person? Yeah. So isn't that the really equality when you're no longer looked at by the color of your skin or your last name?
Like, I can't apply for that because they already have a black guy.
Yeah.
So maybe they don't need another. You know, sadly, it's something I thought about in my past, but, you know, I think slowly we're moving past that.
I think we are.
I really do. I see it more and more every day on newsrooms and TV stations when I travel different.
I don't feel like that now. I have to say I don't feel like that anymore. Not at this juncture in my career.
Right.
I don't feel like people look at me and only think I'm Hispanic. I think people look at me and think that I'm a journalist.
Right. And a fine good one you are. I'm just saying.
Working on it. Working on it.
Well, you know what? We've been getting a lot of feedback out there from a lot of people on social media, our platforms. Chris Kamora, he's been watching that closely for us. And Chris, what are people talking about?
All right, let's talk about things that are in progress, a work in progress. To those of you who participated, by the way, thank you. Let's talk about Melissa in Los Altos. She wrote in on our website and opened with appreciation. She says she loves the series. Then she started talking a lot about her understanding of history, what she was taught as a child and how it's now changing before her eyes. She says she's 57 years old. For the first time, I'm seeing a shift and a little bit of ownership. Marcus and Jessica, we've talked a lot about educating kids about race in America. Well, here's someone who's been out of school for 3 decades learning something new.
You know what? The thing that's so great about what we're doing here, I just want to share a story. I got an email, Chris, from someone with a company here in the Bay Area that we probably all know. But he was saying that right now what they're doing is they're using our conversation as a part of their tool to start that conversation about race and within, you know, their community and how they interact with people. And that's what it really is. It's about unteaching what we were taught in some ways, because we're only taught such a small piece of what the history of America really is. And when you really open the door and you see so much more, you're like, oh.
And people usually say, I didn't know that.
Right.
That's the key thing. I didn't know it. Because, you know, once you know something, then you know better.
Yeah, you know better, you do better.
Exactly.
That's what we try to do. I mean, it's really great to see how many people have been out in the community who really talk about these conversations, open the doors for them to talk about race, to talk about things that are uncomfortable, Jess, but, you know, we are opening that door, and we hope that more people walk through the door each day.
And uncomfortable is getting a little bit more comfortable as we delve in there deeper, which is great. And I loved what that comment that viewer said, because just it goes back to the Dolores Huerta. She's learning something new.
Yeah.
Constantly learning, right?
You're never too old to learn something.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for us. Look, we want to thank you for being a part of this conversation. We're going to keep it going, and we'll see you back here next time.
Stay healthy.